Second verse of the Tao Te Ching. Quote, "Under heaven all can see beauty as beauty, only because there is ugliness. All can know good as good, only because there is evil. Being and non-being produce each other. The difficult is born in the easy. Long is defined by short, the high by the low. Before and after go along with each other. So the sage lives openly with apparent duality and paradoxical unity. The sage can act without effort and teach without words, nurturing things without possessing them. He works, but not for rewards. He competes, but not for results. When the work is done, it is forgotten. That is why it lasts forever." Unquote. Living the paradoxical unity. Has it ever occurred to you that beauty depends on something being identified as ugly? Therefore, the idea of beauty produces the idea of ugliness, and vice versa. Just think of how many concepts in this duality belief system depend on opposites. A person isn't tall unless there's a belief system that includes short. Our idea of life couldn't exist without that of death. Day is the opposite of night. Male is the antithesis of female. What if you instead perceived all as a piece or a glimpse of the perfection of oneness? I think this is what Lao Tzu is suggesting with his description of the sage who lives openly with apparent duality and paradoxical unity. Imagine the perfect oneness coexisting in the apparent duality, where opposites are simply judgments made by human minds in the world of the 10,000 things. Surely the daffodil doesn't think that the daisy is prettier or uglier than it is, and the eagle and the mouse have no sense of the opposites we call life and death. The trees, flowers, and animals know not of ugliness or beauty. They simply are, in harmony with the eternal Tao, devoid of all judgment. As the sage lives openly with apparent duality, he synthesizes the origin with the manifestation, without forming an opinion about it. Living without judgment and in perfect oneness is what Lao Tzu invites his readers to do. He invites our wisdom to combine perceived opposites and live a unified life. The perfection of the Tao is allowing apparent duality while seeing the unity that is reality. Life and death are identical. Virtue and sin are judgments needing both to identify either. These are the paradoxes of a unified life. This is living within the eternal Tao. Once the dichotomies or pairs of opposites are transcended, or at least seen for what they are, they flow in and out of life like the tides. Practice being a living, breathing paradox every moment of your life. The body has physical boundaries. It begins and ends and has material substance. Yet it also contains something that defies boundaries, has no substance, and is infinite and formless. You are both the Tao and the 10,000 things simultaneously. Let the contrasting and opposite ideas be within you at the same time. Allow yourself to hold those opposite thoughts without them canceling each other out. Believe strongly in your free will and ability to influence your surroundings, and simultaneously surrender to the energy within you. Know that good and evil are two aspects of a union. In other words, accept the duality of the material world while still remaining in constant contact with the oneness of the eternal Tao. The debilitating necessity to be right and make others wrong will soon diminish. I believe that Lao Tzu would apply the Tao Te Ching to today's world by suggesting the following. First, live a unified life. Enter the world of oneness with an awareness of the propensity to compartmentalize everything as good or bad, right or wrong, beautiful or ugly, are standards of the physical world, not the Tao. Contemplate the insight that duality is a mind game. In other words, people look the way they look, period. Criticism is not always necessary or helpful. See the unfolding of the Tao inside everyone, including yourself, and be at peace with what you observe. Be a good animal and move freely, unencumbered with thoughts about where you should be and how you should be acting. For instance, imagine yourself as an otter, just living your otterness. You're not good or bad, beautiful or ugly, a hard worker or a slacker. You're simply an otter, moving through the water or on the land freely, peacefully, playing and without judgment. When it's time to leave your body, you do so, reclaiming your place in the pure mystery of oneness. This is what Lao Tzu means when he says, when the work is done, it is forgotten. That is why it lasts forever. In other words, you don't have to leave your body to experience forever. It's possible to know your eternal self even in the embodied condition. When duality and judgment crop up, allow them to be a part of the perfect unity. When other people create dichotomies, you can always know oneness by practicing the Tao. Also, accomplish much by trying less. Effort is one piece of the whole. Another piece is non-effort. Fuse these dichotomies, and the result is effortless action without attachment to outcome. This is precisely how you dance with someone. You make an attempt, assume a position, listen to the music, and let go all at the same time, allowing yourself to easily move with your partner. Combine the so-called opposites into the oneness of being without judgment or fear. Labeling action as a fine effort implies a belief that trying hard is better than not trying. But trying itself only exists because of beliefs about not trying. Attempting to pick up a piece of trash is really just not picking up the trash. Once you've picked it up, then trying and not trying are irrelevant. Understand that you can act without the implied judgment of words such as effort and trying. You can compete without being forced to focus on outcome. Eliminating opposites paradoxically unifies them so that it is unnecessary to identify with one position. I imagine that in today's language, Lao Tzu would sum up this second verse of the Tao Te Ching in these two simple words. Just be. Do the Tao now.
You know, when we're born, a ladder, Rumi said, when you are born, a ladder is placed before you to help you to escape from this world, to teach you that you're in this world, but you're not of this world. You know, and you're always moving toward this place of, and at the top of the ladder is this thing called divine love. And it's always a movement toward that. And many times, the rungs on that ladder are rungs that are tough, are what you call crises, you know. But in fact, they are great teachers. I haven't had alcohol in my body in 25 years. I don't look back on the days that I did drink or do drugs and so on as anything other than just tremendous teachers for me. They were probably one of the most important decisions I ever made in my life, and I was never even an alcoholic. I quit drinking because my teacher in India said, if you want to reach your highest maximum potential, you'll have to live a life of total sobriety because you're destroying brain cells when you put alcohol into your system. And you came here with big dharma. And if you want to fulfill that dharma, you have to keep your brain, you know, where it's always growing instead of where it's always deteriorating. And that was the day I just decided that I wasn't going to do that. I've been through divorce. I've been through being left. I've been through cancer. I've been through a heart attack. These are all, every single one of those, like every advance that you make in your life, is almost always preceded by some kind of a fall, some kind of a, you know, it's like when I always give the example, when I was in high school, I was on the track team. I was the high jumper on the track team. Now, I didn't jump very high because I'm white. You know, and white men don't jump. They even made a movie about it, okay? But anyway, so the way that you get over the bar is you run up to the bar as fast as you can, you get down as low as you can. And in the process of getting down low, you generate the energy to propel yourself over the bar. That's how you, and the lower you get and the faster you go, the more energy you can generate that way. You propel yourself to a higher place. That's sort of a metaphor for everything in life. If you are in a place of crisis, and you're in a place of where you're low and down and hurt, that almost always means that you're going to have a spiritual elevation. You're going to move yourself to a higher place. That will give you the energy to propel yourself upward. And I've just always believed that now stay in a place of gratitude for everything that comes along. And instead of, I've always said there are three ways to reach enlightenment, okay? One is enlightenment through suffering. So with enlightenment through suffering, what you do is you have a experience. Let's say you did a lot of drinking, or you were carousing, or you, whatever it may be, you were sickly or whatever. And then or somebody breaks up with you and so on, and then you suffer, and oh my God, how did this happen, and why did I do that, and why did she leave me, and how could that have, you know, and then you go through like 10 years So that's a 10-year chunk of your life where you're suffering. And ultimately you get to this place where you finally, and almost everyone will tell you, about that crisis. When I look back on it, I realize that it was what allowed me to get to a higher place. So that's one way. The second way is enlightenment through living in the present. That is, when a crisis comes along and you find yourself upset or hurt or whatever, instead of waiting 10 more years of suffering, what you do is you stop yourself right in this moment and you say, what can I do what do I have to learn here? How can I get down on my knees and be thankful to God for this opportunity which is being presented to me, and so on. So you're taking a hold of it in the present moment, which is what I do now with any crisis that may show up in my life. Is I just say I don't have any more 10-year periods. You only get so many of those, and then it's checkout time. So it's so now it's like you get a hold of it right now. And you say, what do I have to learn from this? Like I've been suffering with this neck thing for 7 or 8 months, but every day I'd say thank you for it, and how much that it has taught me to be more compassionate toward people who live in chronic pain, for one example, and so many others, to be less judgmental, to say, to find the place within me where I can heal myself, and so on. So it becomes an impetus for my growth. That's the second way to enlightenment. Now, the third way to enlightenment is where you want to get to, and that's where you can get out in front of the crisis before it arrives. And you can see it coming. And you know that you can play it out you can play out the whole dialogue in advance. So that you're in an argument, whatever, with your spouse or whatever, and you know that she says something, and normally your way of reacting is, well, then, if you think, I'm going to make me wrong, then I'm going to make you wrong, and if I say this, and you play out the dialogue, if I say this, then she's going to say that, and then I'm going to say this, and then she's going to say, then I'm going to do this, and then I'm probably going to walk out, and I'm going to be pissed off for a while, and then, it's like, and you play out, but you do this instantaneously. And you stop and you say, honey, that's a good point. You're right about that. I'll really give it some thought. And it doesn't matter. You have a choice to be right or to be kind, and you just pick kind. It's just very simple. Nothing changes. She's still wrong. At least in your mind she is, or whatever. But you're free. You're free. And so you've gotten out in front of it. And you can go through life living peacefully and in grace by, instead of suffering and instead of struggling in the present moment to figure out what the problem is, you just start seeing that stuff coming, so that when you're walking down a street and across the street you see someone that might be dangerous, or this might be a situation I don't want to be in, instead of going over there, and even potentially creating some kind of, you just say, well, you know what, I just think I'll just walk around this way, and you've avoided it all. You don't even have to deal with it. You don't have to get your macho ego involved in it. You're just simply getting to a point where you can anticipate this. Since there's no time in the universe anyway, then you just let the time thing go, and you just create for yourself exactly the world that you want to be. And as I've said hundreds and thousands of times, it's on my stationery, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. The world is a different world when you look at it from, like this neck thing that I have. I look at it totally differently than I would have even 10 years ago. And now it's just grace. It's just grace, and whatever it is I'm to learn from it, I'm getting.
Arthur Egendorf, writing in Healings from the War, offers this advice that's pertinent to our efforts to rebalance our life and to live peacefully. Only together will we create a culture that supersedes the cycles of battle and retreat, not through our fear of war, but through mastering a superior way to live. The seed of this culture is the determination with individuals and then small groups and communities to devote our lives to the greatest vision of all time, not to wait for a savior one day to deliver us, not to wait for a government to pass truly just laws, not to wait for a revolution to right the wrongs of a cruel world, and not to mount a crusade to overpower some distant source of evil beyond ourselves. Each of us, singly, and with all the others, is answerable for creating joy through the way our lives unfold here and now. And once this purpose becomes primary, we can turn to the endless job of bringing well-being to others, justice and integrity to our government, and instituting constructive programs for change here and elsewhere. When inspired in this way, we don't have to wait for the final outcome before we're nourished. There is no finer way to live or die. The words that speak loudest to me in this sagacious observation are, each of us, singly and with all the others, is answerable for creating joy through the way our lives unfold here and now, unquote. I suggest that the number one thing you can do singly to create joy is remove hate from your inner consciousness. This may be surprising, but please let it sink in. Those who hate war are just as responsible for the presence of war as those who hate their assigned enemies and fight to kill them. Those who hate crime are part of the crime problem. Those who hate cancer make cancer a foe and become part of the cancer problem. Like everything else in this program, the secret to rebalancing life is not necessarily to change your behavior as much as it is to realign yourself and create a culture that supersedes the cycles of battle and retreat. Whenever we use force to resolve our disputes, we instantly create a counterforce. This is largely responsible for the never-ending cycles of war that have defined human history. Force, counterforce, more force, and the battles go on, generation after generation. This is true within you as well. A thought of hate creates a thought of revenge, and then more hateful thoughts in response. And the real problem is that these thoughts of hatred and revenge begin to define your existence. They become your point of attraction. Your initial desire to live peacefully in a world that the media reports has gone berserk is a spiritually balanced desire. In order to materialize your desire, you must extend thoughts that match the energy of that desire. Thoughts of hate will not blossom into your desired peacefulness, and the reason has been repeated throughout this program. You attract more and more of that which you desire to eradicate. Breaking the cycle. You can detach yourself from thoughts of hatred, despite the news from a media driven by a profit mentality. The more you buy into hatred, the more those who sell the messages benefit. But you can decide that you'll be an instrument of joy. So how does an instrument of joy react to a cacophony of loud, disturbing news? If you're in balance, you're most likely able to assess the place of love and peace that you are. You remember your mission and your desire to be in balance and peaceful by asserting that even though millions of others elect to be in hatred, this is simply not your calling. You didn't decide to incarnate into a world where everyone has the same vision. Your thoughts turn to, I'm a divine creation. I choose to stay connected to this divinity in all of my thoughts and in all of my actions. Then, what do you do when you hear about people blown up by terrorists or any other actions that are decidedly non-peaceful? Here's what I remind myself to think and say. I want to feel good. I didn't sign up for war or warlike thoughts. I'm an instrument of peace, and I send peaceful, loving thoughts to those people and places in the world who seem to need it so desperately. I refuse to collaborate with the energy of hatred anywhere, anytime. The alternative to this kind of peaceful thinking is anger, hatred, and fear, which aligns perfectly with the energy that is so distasteful. And your immediate reaction is then to seek revenge. A counterforce is established, and you're aligned with the same energy of hate that caused you to feel less than peaceful. What if, in response to suicide bombers, we tended the injured and grieved the dead, but didn't publicize the tragedy with news reports? What if no one reported the consequences of this kind of violence? No news reports, no film. What if we chose to respect the pain of the relatives and survivors by not commercializing pictures of their grief? What if this kind of thinking surfaced when these acts of hatred took place? The people who perpetrate these incidents are acting out of their own thoughts of hatred, hoping that others will respond in kind, and that hatred will continue unabated. But if it was no longer news, if no one gave them attention, their acts would necessarily have to come to a halt. You, personally, can be one of those people who stubbornly refuses to add low-energy thoughts to the hate you observe. By doing so, you can contribute to the demise of hatred. You can act singly to create more joy by steadfastly refusing to be hateful in any of your thoughts. You break the cycle of violence in the world not by hating violence, but by being your own instrument of peace.
Well, when I was 19 years old, I took out a little notebook, and it was one of the first things I wrote down for this book that I was to write 40 years later. And I wrote a note to myself. It said, "Dear Wayne," and I still have it, "don't die with your music still in you." And it became a theme in my life. that all of us show up here into this world. We are intended here by a source from which all things are intended. Everything comes from that source. And everything that you needed for this physical journey was in that moment of your conception and even before. But most of us have let go of that dream. Or we don't know how powerful we are. When I was in the 3rd grade, I came home from school, and I said to Mrs. Scarf, which is the lady whose home we lived in, she had 52-some children living in that home, I said, "What's a scurvy elephant?" She said, "A what?" I said, "A scurvy elephant." She said, "Where did you hear that?" I said, "Well, I heard Mrs. Poole, who was my 3rd grade teacher, telling Mrs. Smith, who was the principal, outside of the classroom that Wayne Dyer was in her classroom and that he was a scurvy elephant." She got on the telephone and she called the principal, and the principal said, "Oh, that's Wayne. He gets everything mixed up." She didn't say that he was a scurvy elephant in her classroom. She said that he was a disturbing element in her classroom. And I think you have to understand that becoming a scurvy elephant or a disturbing element is a part of the process of not dying with your music still in you. That there is something that you showed up here to become, just like there was something that allowed you to grow into this body that you're in. The same force, the same field of intention that intended you here to be in this body, in the shape that it is in the size that it is, in the color that it is, in the shape of its eyes, in the color of its hair, whether you have any or don't, whether it falls out or doesn't, all of that. It was all intended here. And also everything that you were to become. And there is a sense inside of you, someplace in a very quiet place, an inner sense, an inner Tahiti, an inner island of peace that knows. You know that you're not this body that you're in. You know where it's going. You know it showed up from nowhere. Nowhere. And when it went from nowhere, it showed up in now here. Nowhere. It's all the same, just a little question of spacing. So now you're in now here, most of you. And you look around and you look at yourself and you watch your body go through its motions, and where the hell do you think it's going? Back to nowhere. From nowhere to now here to nowhere. But while it's here, there is something burning inside every one of us. And all we have to do is understand that strangest secret. And the strangest secret is we become what we think about. Our thoughts are the magic elixir. I remember being in that orphanage, and a snowstorm would come, and there were 2 snow shovels in the basement of that house. And I took that snow shovel that was downstairs. There were 2. One had the edges all curled up, and you couldn't make much money with a snow shovel with edges that were curled up. There was another bright, shiny one that Mr. Scarf had made himself. And I used to go down there when it would start snowing, and it seemed to snow a lot more in those days than it does today. And I would sleep with that snow shovel. And I would go outside at 5 o'clock in the morning, wake myself up, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, and I would shovel everybody's walk on Tucker Street. Everybody. I didn't ask if it was okay and would you like me to and could I and maybe and so on. I just took the initiative and I went out there and shoveled their snow. And then I went back later that morning with my best little Oliver routine, because I was cute. It may not look like it now, but I was then. Cute little blonde hair, and I had little, and I would stand there, and I would just tell them that I shoveled your snow for you this morning. And sometimes I get a nickel or a dime. I even got a quarter a couple of times. Doesn't sound like much, but that's $4,000 in today's money, okay?
And it wasn't like there was something in here that said, this is what you do, and you act upon what it is that you feel in here, because that thought that you have is something in the Course in Miracles that says, when I take this microphone to speak, and I'm being introduced as Gary was introducing me, I repeat a line from A Course in Miracles. And the line that I repeat says, if you knew who walked beside you at all times on this path that you have chosen, you could never experience fear or doubt again. You couldn't do it if you had a knowing that you weren't alone. If you knew it from in here with that burning desire. And it is that connection, it is the ability to go and connect to that